Hey guys, it's Lainey. First question. How much farther do you hope to have in your project by the end of April, and what is the premise of your novel? I definitely thought I'd be a lot farther in my project. My goal was to kind of have my read-through of my manuscript done within a few days. That didn't happen. It took a couple weeks. I wanted to be a little bit further in actually revising in document, which I haven't really done that much of, so I wish I was a little bit farther than I am. However, I really feel accomplished with all I've done so far this month. The premise of my novel is, I've said this before, but in case you aren't quite sure what it is, I'm writing a sort of a fairy tale story. It's not a retelling because I'm taking the character Little Red Riding Hood and seeing where she's at 10 years from now. Another question is, who wrote Wonderbook? If you don't know what Wonderbook is, it's this fantastic resource book for writing fantasy. The person who wrote it is Jeff Vandermeer. If you look this up on Amazon, I feel like I only paid like $15 for it, and I feel like that's a really good deal for a pretty thick, fully illustrated book. The next question is, when do you plan on publishing and how? Right now, publishing is on my mind, but is very far off in the future. I think it's going to depend on how I feel about it after I've gone through the revisions and after I sent it to Kayla and Kenya, because they're, my writing buddies. They're gonna, tell me what they think about it. If I were to publish this, I would go through traditional publishing. I mean, I support indie authors and self-publishing and all that. I've read a ton of self-published books, but for me, I would rather go the traditional way. I'd rather, query for a agent and have them try to get it sold to one of the bigger publishing houses. That would be my goal. So that's how I would go about doing it. The next question is, what is the genre of your story? The genre of my story, I would say, is historical fantasy. I might be changing the time period of my novel now that I'm reading through it. I kind of want to make it maybe in the Victorian era. I feel like I would like that more, but then that would require a lot more research for me because I don't know that much about the Victorian era. I don't really like to read the books from the Victorian era, so I don't know much about the time period, so I'd have to research that. How many other stories, unfinished or completed, do you have in the works? Oh boy. Okay, I have a lot of unfinished stories that I have started and never finished. I have a dystopian road trip story that's in my files in my computer. That was going to be my project for NaNoWriMo 2013, but I never ended up doing NaNoWriMo 2013. I have about 2,000, 3,000 words written for that story, and it's still very, it's in my head. I also have another dystopian, not quite supernatural, but they have powers, so there's, that story. And that one I'm actually pretty far in for writing. And that one had 25,000 words, I think, before I quit. And I actually had that one up on Figment for a while. Figment.com. I used to be really involved in that site, but then they were bought out by another company and I didn't really like where it was going, so I don't really write there anymore. The only story I have up on that one is the one I won the night school writing contest for. If you wanted to read some of my writing, even though it's very old, that was from 2013, I have a story that I won first place on over there. I've also had a long-running crime fiction novel in the catacombs of my computer that I've worked on and off for a couple years. It started out as like a short story and then it kind of grew a little bit bigger. I really, really love it, obviously. I love my writing style in this because I feel it's different than some of my other writing styles in different projects, if that makes sense. It's about a psychiatrist whose father was actually a serial killer, and her and her brother, now as they're adults, they're having to deal with a copycat. How long have you been writing? I have been writing a long time. I feel like I didn't really feel like this is what maybe I wanted to do with my life, writing more and more, until I was about 13 or 14. That's when I started writing a lot online. For anybody else that remembers what Neopets was an amazing site, and a lot on their message boards, they had like the role-playing message boards where, you come up with the character and you write with other people, and I did that before I moved off-site to do more of those kind of writing collaborative with other people elsewhere on other sites. So maybe even 12, 13, 14, I started doing the Neopets thing, and then after I was like 14, I kind of moved away from that. I've been writing passionately for 10 years. The next question is, are you going to get any snippets in the future? I think it means, are you going to give any snippets in the future? Maybe, maybe not, and probably more on the maybe not part. Is this your favorite genre or the one you feel most comfortable with? I've never written a fantasy. I've never been in the fantasy realm before, ever. So, but I mean, I do have magic in my story, so I've written about magic before, so there's like that familiarity, but I've never written a historical fantasy novel before, so this was new for me. I mostly wrote, actually, crime fiction for all through high school and most of college, but I've still been very passionate about young adult. I love young adult, and I always pictured myself as a young adult author, not a crime fiction author, if that makes sense. Without getting into spoilers, how did the idea of this story was born? I talked about this a little bit in my character development video, where a lot of the times I'm always interested to see what happens after the end of certain stories, especially in fairy tales, especially in, believe it or not, slasher films, horror, slasher, teen flicks. Love that genre of movies, by the way. You just see, like, this character, all their friends die, all their family dies, and they're the only lone survivor at the end of the film. I just always think, like, where are you gonna be in like 2 weeks? Like, how are you dealing with this? Especially with fairy tales. I mentioned Hansel and Gretel. I mentioned Little Red Riding Hood, obviously. Those stories where things traumatically happen to young children. The wolf happened to Little Red Riding Hood. The witch happened to Hansel and Gretel. How do you deal with that? Like, what happens after you go through an event like that? So that's where the inspiration of my story came from. I took the character Little Red Riding Hood and placed her 10 years in the future. Where would she be after her encounter with the wolf? How do you start? From the very beginning, once you have a single idea, what do you do next? How do you start? I think you just start with a character. You have a character that you really like, you pick that character up and you place them in a situation. It can be anything. A character can move from genre to genre. I think if you're just starting out, maybe outlining would help if you want to just like put where you want your story to go, if that would help you, or just freelance it. Go and write. Just don't even think about it. Just write what you would maybe want to read. How do you avoid writer's block, and what tips do you have on trying to push past it? I actually did a video on this, so I'm going to link that one down below so you guys can check out my 4 tips for getting over writer's block. What is your top 3 tips for people who are just starting to write? First tip is write what you would want to read. Second tip is start with a character and put them in a situation that would be interesting. My third tip would be to not worry about what your writing is like and don't compare it to other people's, because if you're just starting out to write, it's going to be rough and you have to be, prepared for that. It's not going to be your best. Thank you for everybody who asked questions. These were really great questions, and I hope I gave some good advice back to you guys for the answers. Hope you guys all have a really great day, and I'll see you guys very soon. Bye!